Today is Friday, December 27th, 2024. The time right now is 10:03 a.m. This is just about a dream that I've had, and the messaging in it felt very prominent. So I thought I would make a log about it. Basically, in the dream, it was me and my mom, and she had a cat in this dream. I've never seen this cat before. It was kind of grayish in color. And when I first saw it, it was a bit of like a kitten, and it was just like playful and cuddly. And then all of a sudden it would just like transform into a more like scraggling, like still like a kitten, but like scraggly and like sort of unkempt, and it would bite and scratch. It's kind of like what cats already kind of do, right? Sometimes, I've heard so many people say things like how cats can be these like furry little balls of like destruction, right? They're always like knocking things over, or at the snap of a finger they'll like bite their owner. And a lot of this has to do with how they play and how they show affection, is through kind of kneading and through biting. But in this dream in particular, it seemed almost like as soon as I woke up, the impression I kind of got was like the way the werewolf, the change of like a werewolf from like a human to the werewolf, right, it's so drastic, it's so different, and this cat's kind of energy in that way was very different. It was almost like it was a whole new different cat, like it was unrecognizable. And it was more than just like playful biting or anything. It was like this cat was like drawing blood. But it was weird because in the dream it seemed like my mom wasn't willing to like I don't know if she didn't see it, or it was like she was completely unaware to this other side of the cat, right? And it was like the reason that I was there is because she was going to be going away, and I had to take care of the cat, and we were kind of discussing how to take care of this cat. And I mentioned, I guess because she didn't see this other side of the cat, she didn't realize that his teeth were different, right? They were more like, not really jagged, but all like the canines that cats have and like dogs have, those four at the front. It was like all of his teeth were these like sharp canines, and there was like gaps in between them. So I mentioned how with some of his dry food I could like wet it a little bit so it's easier for him to chew and eat, because I wasn't sure if those type of teeth, like the dry food, would work well with it. And my mom said, yeah, sure, whatever you need to do. And that was kind of the end of the dream. I would imagine this is the tail end of my entire like dream sequence, but this is what stood out. And I think immediately upon awakening I kind of realized but this kind of has to do with the sort of feminine energy in all of us. Cats often are an indication of feminine energy, just like historically. And the fact that I didn't really recognize this cat told me it was more than just like a personal presence or a personal energy, that this has to do with something beyond me, and beyond sort of just my life, right? So I would say it's a representation of the feminine energy. And I think excuse me, I think what's important to sort of realize is that how we view very important aspects of ourselves, right? It comes from how we've seen people we respect, or elders in our family, people that like raised us, right? It doesn't even necessarily have to be people we respect. What I mean by people we respect actually is just like, as a kid you kind of look up to everyone, right? Especially like your parents or whoever raised you. As you get older, you start seeing like there might be like issues there, or certain things you shouldn't look up to. But as a kid, you kind of look up to anyone that raised you, right? So I'm talking about like that sort of reverence, right? It's almost giving the impression of like certain seeds are planted inside of us when we're very, very young, when we're like kids, and that applies in this context as well. So certain important aspects of ourselves, the way it really is and the way we see it gets warped based off of how others around us treat it, right? Or how others around us interact with it, right? And so we start adopting their points of view, right? And this is kind of, I feel like, is kind of standard. It's understandable. But in this instance in particular, when we're talking about the feminine energy, there's so much confusion. I mean, there's a lot of confusion, I think, around masculine energy as well. I think because we've given them this like feminine and like masculine name, we have very like skewed perception of it, and then it kind of skews how we view gender as well, I think. But essentially we don't have the most it's almost like we have a disconnect with a lot of people. I'm not saying like all people, but a lot of people, myself included, we have this disconnect with the feminine energy because of how we've seen as children, how we've seen others in our environment, people we've looked up to treat this feminine energy, right? So we always hear this narrative. When I kind of have observed the sort of spiritual communities, I've witnessed this narrative around feminine energy being love and light, right? Love and light. And that's, yes, that is an aspect of the feminine energy. And I think a lot of people do also talk about like dark feminine energy, but it's always like one or the other. People are either talking about dark feminine energy or love and light, like light feminine energy. But the thing is, they must work together. If you look at anything out in the real world, right? If everything was always just like light and there was no shadow, we wouldn't be able to see like the outlines of things, right? And similarly, if things were always shadow, right? As in, I think that nighttime is a good example of this. Like if there was no moon and it was just nighttime, you would literally not see anything. You need light as well. So that's kind of how the feminine energy works, right? There's aspects of it that are dark. There's aspects of it that are light. And you have to acknowledge both sides in order to be able to realize that different aspects of it need different things to be nurtured and to be to work for you, right? I don't know if that's the best way to say that, but in order for something to sort of walk in step with you, you have to make sure that you're nurturing and nourishing and even just acknowledging these things, right? Imagine if you have like a horse or something, or a mule, and you guys are kind of walking together, but over time you kind of you ignore this mule, you don't feed it properly, it's going to fall behind you, it's not going to walk in step with you anymore, right? You have to treat every aspect of yourself in this way as well. Not so much feed it in the sense that, like, especially when it comes to like shadows, you don't really want to feed your shadows, you want to acknowledge them, you want to understand them. You don't want to just turn a blind eye to them. The same goes for like the dark feminine aspects of yourself. And I say this because for a long time I was very like I turned a blind eye, and I didn't really want to acknowledge the darker kind of feminine aspects of myself, right? Not that I was always just like love and light. I just thought I always wanted to stay neutral. I never wanted to go too much into like any direction. But in doing so, I think because of the way I was raised, I ignored the darker aspects so much. And I think a lot of women are raised this way, where you're taught to ignore the more primal, the more like subconscious, like I would like like the darker aspects of yourself, the parts that you people would teach you to be ashamed of. Like, for one, I would say, like sexuality, it's often very much frowned upon for women to be like sexually liberated or whatever. But it's like perfectly fine and even encouraged in men. So there's aspects of yourself that you have, right? But you're often taught to be ashamed of and to bury and to hide. These are these often can be aspects of the dark divine feminine energy, right? And so we tend, because of this like shame that we're kind of taught, that these are unladylike or whatever it is that you hear kind of growing up, it gets passed on from generation to generation. So you keep just sort of ignoring these parts of yourself, even if it's like biting and scratching at you. You turn a blind eye to it because you don't want to be thought of as less than. You don't want to become undesirable, right? So you ignore them. But it's important, again, like I said, in order for certain aspects of yourself to work for you. In fact, I would even go so far as to say, for all aspects of you to work for you, you need to acknowledge them. You need to understand them beyond just what they seem like. So I was talking about sexuality earlier. You need to look beyond what it is on the surface of being like whatever, like sexually liberated or sexually open. And you kind of have to look at what this is in general and what it means for you, right? And so this goes for, I think, all like dark feminine aspects. And it's funny because I've been seeing a lot of signs of like dark feminine, like goddesses, recently, just like here and there. Signs of like Persephone in particular. I've been seeing a lot of like pomegranates, and I've been seeing little signs of like other dark goddesses as well. But Persephone in particular, and the reason I bring her up is because of a quote that I saw a while back that always kind of like every now and then I'll like think of this quote, and I think it's possibly like from Tumblr or Twitter or something, but it was, what they were saying is that like, if Persephone can be the goddess and the queen of the underworld as well as the goddess of spring, then like why can't you have these polarizing opposite aspects of yourself and marry them together? That's not the exact quote, but essentially that's what it was saying. But it definitely starts off with like Persephone. If Persephone can be the queen of the underworld as well as being the goddess of spring, right, then like why can't you, essentially. So I think there's something, and I've been seeing a lot about like balance as well, particularly a balance of like masculine and feminine energies, like a union within the self, and sort of like understanding what these things are. Because again, like, because we've given them like the masculine and like feminine, like these names, we've labeled them as these things, I think we have very skewed perceptions of what these energies actually are, because at the end of the day they're just energies. They have nothing to do with like gender or sex or anything, but because we've given them these names, particularly for people like outside of this sort of like discipline, I don't know, like people who don't really interact with a lot of like intuitive stuff or energy related stuff, right? They'll look in and they might like scoff or put off what divine masculine and feminine energies are because it's so gendered, or it seems to be so gendered, right? A good way, I think, I thought would be to look at it is by calling them yin and yang, right? But even with that, it's like light and dark. It's just very polarizing. But the whole idea of yin and yang is that they're kind of meant to be married. They're meant to be united. They're meant to work with each other, right? You need one in order for the other to exist. They need to be balanced, right? But yeah, I've been seeing a lot of signs of like balance between this sort of masculine and feminine, light and dark energies within the self, united within the self. And I thought I would like bring that up because it feels like been leading up to this, and I've known for a while that for a lot of people, women, I think, or women presenting people in particular, the feminine energy is almost, I actually no I as I say this, I just realized that, like, especially also in like male presenting people as well, is like you're taught, in no matter what your gender or your sex is, you're always taught to sort of either misunderstand what the feminine energy is, or and so like you're asked to sort of hide certain parts of your feminine aspect, or just like disregard it entirely for like, for like men, like you're kind of taught to not, like, it's something despicable to be like feminine in any way, but it's not even like the fullness of the feminine. The reason I think why the yin and yang symbol is the way it is that even if someone is all yang, like all light, there's going to be some dark in them, right? There's going to be some shadow in them, and vice versa. So it's like no matter who you are, no matter how you want to present yourself, as the most like masculine man in the world, there is still some feminine aspects in you, because you are human at the end of the day, right? And you're a part of the universe, and I think every part of the universe, everything that exists, have both sides to it. You need to have balance. It's kind of like what I was saying earlier, where you need the light in order to have the shadows, right? Or else you'll just be seeing like white, and you will be seeing no outlines of anything. And you need light in order to see things, right? Otherwise it's complete darkness. So that's kind of, I think, the message here is that you need to not only acknowledge the feminine aspects of yourself and understand what it is, but you also need to acknowledge that the feminine energy has darker aspects, and they need to be acknowledged as well. They need to be nurtured as well. There's so many things. I feel like so many signs have led up to this, because I saw a little post, and it was about how certain traits, like certain good, quote unquote, like good traits, like loyalty or devotion and stuff, can often have like shadow aspects. So with devotion, it's like obsession. Loyalty can be like people pleasing, right? Any standalone thing, if pushed to an extreme, can be bad, right? And it works in reversal too. So let's say you are very obsessed. If you can work with that, again, you nurture it and you sort of discipline it, you bring it up to speed with you, right, as you're walking, with that mule analogy. If you could make it work for you, it turns into that loyalty, right? Did I say loyalty? Or it turns into the devotion, right? Which is a more pure form, I guess. It's not too polarizing on like one end. It's not too extreme, I should say. So you can make things work for you. I think this is where like shadow work also comes in. I often have thought that a lot of dark feminine like aspects overlap with like shadows within a person. Maybe even like dark masculine stuff, right? Like anything that's like dark, I feel like is naturally going to be a part of your shadow. But you can make these things work for you if you understand them, if you understand why they're there, why they've developed, right? And that does take some work, and it does take some effort, but I promise you that if you start, that it is, the hardest part is going to be just like getting yourself to want to do this thing, right? To want to acknowledge your shadow, to want to acknowledge your dark feminine aspects. It's almost like the hardest part is like opening your eyes, and then everything else is like really, it's kind of smooths it. Like it comes very naturally to you, right? So certain things might be like painful to admit or embarrassing to admit. Some things might make you cringe, but like it's not going to be difficult. You're not going to have to like claw at trying to understand these parts of yourself, because ultimately every aspect of yourself, whether it be a masculine aspect or a feminine aspect, whether it be light or dark, they want your acknowledgement, right? They want your acknowledgement so bad. So the second you sort of embrace these things, again, not in the way that you're kind of feeding it, but you're I like thinking of it as like parenting, in a sense, where like you don't want to overindulge a child, or you don't want to fully neglect it, but you're trying to raise a child, you're trying to guide them, right? So essentially within yourself, you're doing the same thing with these like shadowy aspects, right? Where you're trying to sort of guide them in the right direction, like put the energy in the right direction. So when you do kind of acknowledge that you're doing this, when you sort of embrace this role as a guide for these energies within you, you'll find that it's very like smooth sailing, like the understandings come very easily. And overall it becomes a much harmonious, again, the balance kind of things kind of even out within you. So yeah, that was kind of the whole dream and theta experience that I had this morning, and I thought I would make like a note of it, because it seems beyond just like my own, like it's not just for me. I feel like it's more than, it's like a more universal, I think, dawning is the word that came to mind. It's like a universal, or I don't have the words for it. It's like a universal, for the universal understanding, or an understanding for like a more universal purpose.